Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me fine?
You're
Or
very, very quiet.
how about now?
It's a little better.
Now?
Yeah, that's better.
Cool. I don't know. Zoom has different set of problems. I don't get this annoyed when using different systems. Like Zoom is the only one where I face microphone issues.
I feel
I
like,
don't
yeah, it
get it.
changes my settings all the time on me. Hello. Are you expecting anyone else today, or does this look like quorum? I think we're good. I have one agenda item on the dock. I don't know if anyone else has anything, but feel free to add stuff. Yeah, Rita mentioned in Slack last week that there were some issues with some thumbs up emojis on them. So I kind of just went through and looked at those and threw them onto my here. I'll screen share. Threw them onto my private GitHub board here. And did some reading about read through some of the history on some of these. Yeah, it was informative. I think so starting with number 4 here and going down, these are sorted by number of thumbs up on them. So the first one is this error that people were running into that I see there's been a fair bit of activity on over time. But yeah, we've got 27 thumbs up on this one, and I think I remember right. There was, yeah, last week there was activity on this, but I don't think there's been any comments from any
I
maintainers in a while. Yeah,
honestly, I we should probably just close this, right? Like looking through the history, I think the last comment is this is not us, right? So yeah, people keep thumbs upping it. I get that they still see this error, but unfortunately it's not anything that we have control over. And Rita has an investigation, if I remember right, that kind of like points to a common Kubernetes thread that's maybe even pointing to a common like Golang issue here.
Yeah, and I opened this issue because I knew people would hit this, and I didn't want a bunch of people creating the same issues. So I think we should maybe just do some due diligence review, like uh the issue is still in uh Kubernetes, and nothing we can do here, and then just close it.
Yeah, I mean, some Honestly, though, the other problem is people just reopen it and continue thumbs upping it. Like, did we close it at some point saying not us? And
No, we never close it. I think that's the issue. Because
okay.
only the original creator can open it. They can, I mean, people can still comment on it, but
Oh,
it
can
doesn't-
reopen, got you. I mean, yeah, I'm not against opening it, closing it, due diligence or whatever. I think people still thumbs up this. Maybe not even having read the history, because I do think if they read the history, they would thumbs up the core bug, right? Because that's really where the call to action lies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe the issue is that it's not clear in the original issue that it is not us.
Well, I think I'm.
So I think maybe we need to clarify there, like, hey, look here, arrows.
That
Yeah, I
was
mean, if
literally
I-
my first comment, right? I said,
Oh,
I said it does not seem like there's any.
Yeah, I don't think people read that.
Okay,
They
well-
look at the first issue and it's like, okay.
Okay.
But if I mean, they may not even read the first issue either, so they can just look at the title and then comment.
Okay, how about this? How about I'll just follow up and make sure it's still very much in KK and then I'll make sure the issue description has the not us thing in there and then just close it. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah, and if they keep thumbs upping it, like, whatever. At that point. Like, I agree. Yeah, like, clearly they're still seeing it, but there's nothing we could do, so.
It's a thumbs upocracy.
Oh, one issue is I guess like when this is created, it says bug. I can, well, first remove it as a bug and then maybe,
Do we have like a known issue or something?
yeah, we don't have a known issue. I was looking for that.
Yeah.
But do we all agree it's not a bug in Gatekeeper, right?
It seems like it's not a bug in Gatekeeper. It's a complicated enough thing that I'm not 100% confident, but I also, it doesn't seem to actually be causing any issues.
Yeah.
So I agree with your analysis. I just don't want to be like hyper confident that there's not something else also going on.
Should we add the 1/6 label? That seems like the most fitting.
That's the one that jumped out to me. We won't fix it indeed. Someone else will. The Go team. All right. Well, it sounds like there's a plan for this one. This next one to me looked like is solved by PubSub. Like, I think that's the use case here, right? Like, there needs to be some kind of shim built between to subscribe to a topic that's getting published to, and then output that to Slack or Teams through the SDK. But that's what it looks like to me.
Or like consuming like metrics and stuff, you can set up alerting for that. I mean, we just never documented because this is outside of Gatekeeper, really.
Yeah.
I think there's like a Prometheus Alert Manager. I think I looked at it in the past, but yeah, we never published anything like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's just been a couple one-off comments this last year. Yeah.
Update this to point to the PubSub like doc, at least, and then close it.
I'm not. I don't think this pops up specifically. This is more like, hey, can I get like these things in Slack?
Yeah, but I think PubSub is one way to accomplish that.
Yeah. Just like today, you can do that with logs or metrics, right?
Yeah, one thing I'm wary of here is like we can own outputs. I don't necessarily want to take responsibility for the things that those outputs go to, right? If there's, you know, a pipeline from PubSub to Slack, cool. They should use that if they want, but
Yeah, this is more like a community sort of outside of Gatekeeper core things. So Gatekeeper provides like the outputs like logs and metrics and PubSub, but then like somebody can write an article in like Medium or something about like how to hook that up with, I don't know, Slack or whatever.
Yeah, the infrastructure for someone to achieve this is absolutely in place on the Gatekeeper side, especially now that PubSub is available.
PubSub is not completely available.
Yeah,
right?
it's not in webhook, right?
Never mind.
Yeah.
Still, metrics.
Raining on your parade. But,
Prometheus.
metrics, just to knit, one previous common ask was people wanting to put like a little too much information in metric labels, which, you know, there's the dual issue of metrics aren't particularly locked down, so you can worry about information leakage, but also cardinality of metrics. So metrics in terms of like, hey, I have a lot of violations on my cluster, I should check that out. Absolutely. Metrics in terms of like specific violations piped through, probably not. So I just want to throw cold water on where metrics can be useful. Just
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, it could be like more like 0 change to 1 or like some sort of thing to get like alerted on Slack.
Yeah, like rejections per second, if it spikes, probably you're like interfering with some controller, right? Or someone's like maliciously making requests, but
And if they
probably.
want specific details at a like per violation level, they can use PubSub when that, you know, to achieve that.
Yeah, PubSub or logs, like metrics are good for having a quick signal that, hey, there's a response to be taken. They're not like the way to hard code your responses.
Okay, I can take the follow-up on this one I'll provide links to docs on logging metrics and PubSub and close it.
Do you think just pointing to links as an issue comment is enough, or do we want like a short section in the doc in the website in the docs to actually have like, hey, if you want to do this, these are various sources and tools that you can use to accomplish that.
Do we have an observability section in the docs currently? Because yeah, we could add something to that.
We do. We have the metrics stuff.
I'm okay with like linking to ideas. I wouldn't want to get like too specific because I don't think that would be evergreen.
Yeah, nothing specific, but I think I'm just worried like if it's just like comments in an issue and we close it, it's easy to not see it and then keep opening the same issue again.
Yeah, could we say like things like redirect to things like Prometheus Alert Manager? So like, hey, if you want to accomplish this, here are some tools you can use, like Prometheus Alert Manager or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
But not be specific about here's how you deploy Prometheus Alert Manager.
Right.
If we do Prometheus Alert Manager, I would definitely want to caveat it with the limitations of Prometheus metrics.
Yeah, so let's get a PR out for website if that's okay, and then we can close this out.
Sounds good.
Do you want to assign it to yourself?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay.
All right, this one, yeah, folks wanted just the star as an option on resource versions for syncing to the cache. It looks like there has been some activity on this one from maintainers.
Honestly, hopefully this gets mooted over time. There's definitely technical complexity involved and also operational complexity here. I don't think there's a way to run a watch against the discovery API, right? And so using globs, like right now, we just use sync sets and config as the source of truth as to what versions we expect to see on the cluster and try to sync those directly. So the system doesn't need to dynamically interact with the discovery API in any way, shape, or form. This would change that, which would be non-trivial. But also, operationally speaking, every version you sync doubles the footprint of caching a given kind, right? And so if you have some high volume thing like pods and you have multiple versions, you run a pretty, I don't know if it's a high risk because I don't know how often versions change, but like if you upgrade your K8s cluster, for instance, you could find yourself making Gatekeeper much more costly to run just by changing the operational environment. The part where I'm hoping it gets mooted over time would be with the sync set stuff and the constraint template annotation work, because there's no point in syncing anything that you don't have any policy written against, right? So it could be that, if someone's just looking to set and forget, right, that you could build something on top of these annotations in Gatekeeper and sync sets that will enable that for you. One wrinkle to that is if someone somewhere writes some constraint template where it does make sense to sync multiple versions of the same object or to sync all kinds in a cluster. I don't know what that would look like, right? Like all names must be unique everywhere. It seems like a weird constraint to have, but that would be one use case that wouldn't be met by the annotations, at least today.
Can you click on allow wildcards in resource? Yeah, I just want to make sure that.
Oh, I think this was just opened as the mention is like this is a duplicate. Maybe.
Well, no, I think this is specifically making sure. Oh, okay. Is this somehow different? No. I thought this was to make sure this is in the in the new design.
Oh no, that's definitely config, not sync set, because it is
Okay.
sync only.
So where do we address this in sync set?
So my contention is sync set might moot this, right? Because the reasons I could see for wanting a glob here is so that you don't need to worry about what policies people are writing. Where if you use annotations, right, then you can use those annotations as a source of truth to achieve a similar thing. We probably don't want to actuate against constraint template annotations in Gatekeeper directly because of the permissions escalation issue. But you could install some sort of side process that could look at annotations and create sync sets if you wanted to. The other concern with using glob without any other additional semantics around it is one thing people probably don't want to sync as secrets, right? It just increases the likelihood that those can be exfiltrated. And so you would want some kind of exclusion mechanism, right? If you're using all kinds, all groups, right? As opposed to like all versions, which is a little safer security-wise, but still operationally risky.
Sure, but just to confirm, I don't think today you could do wildcard, right, for sync set.
Correct.
Right, so as next step for this guy, we can, we can create another issue specific to add it for sync set.
Well,
or
I'm pushing back generally against the idea of wildcards here. One, because it would be a very expensive thing to do. Two, with, I think, limited use, given what we're unblocking with sync sets. Three, with quite a few negative operational considerations that we should probably encourage users to think through, like syncing secrets, like caching stuff in RAM unnecessarily, right? And again, if we have sync sets and we want to build like a sidecar thing, then what gets synced can correlate to the policy that's actually written, and you can sidestep a lot of these issues, right? You would still not have to worry, because the only reason I could see for wanting a glob here is do not have to worry if the surface area of your cluster changes, right? But you still have to worry about that, right? Because your policies are written against specific GPKs. So basically, linking things directly to the policy meets their use case. I wouldn't do it because of permissions escalation issues, depending on who's able to write policies. But if they want it, that would be probably the avenue I would go down.
Okay, so it sounds like your opinion is to just add the versions that you want to sync, right? And not open up the wildcard option at all.
Yeah. And if their concern is they don't want to keep track of what policies they have versus the state of their config, well, we're working on that, right? Sync sets make it a little easier, and then there's other stuff you can do on top of it.
Did you already comment in this issue?
I am not sure. Definitely read it. And there's a couple of related issues. I might have talked about the complexity bit around there's no real way to watch the discovery API.
Okay, maybe as a next step, since you feel very strongly about this, maybe you should comment and list out the reasons and then just close it.
Okay.
Sounds good. I think in the following ones, there's definitely a recurring theme of inability to iterate over cache. Yeah. So this one was restricting verbs on mutate. There's definitely been activity on this one.
Yeah, there was, Alex was gonna look at this, but he's no longer working on this project, and people who will come in are still ramping up. So it'll be a while before I at least have resources to look at this again.
Oh yeah, that's right. So we moved this one from 315 to 316. And well, I'm guessing we'll probably have to drop it from 316 too. Yeah. All right. Well, so this one is on the radar.
Do you want to keep it in the milestone for now, move it later, or move it now?
We can continue to keep it. I think that's what we decided last time, was like we knew that there was going to be some resource constraints and it probably wouldn't make it, but we can, I think we opted to just leave it for now, so we can continue to do that.
I mean, it's likely to get pushed back again. You know, I don't see what the next release is in a couple of months. It's going to be a while before things ramp up on my
Yeah,
end.
my concern with leaving it is that because it is one of the main issues on the repo that's had some attention, I wouldn't want to like make users think that, oh, we're definitely going to do it in the next release. I guess we're down to 9 thumbs, so not a ton, but we can let's revisit it at the next milestone review. Next time we do a run through of the open issues in the milestone, we'll make a decision. No automated way to wait on constraint template C or D. Oh yeah, this was the Helm shenanigans. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything we can.
It seems like out of scope for Gatekeeper to handle this.
Yeah.
This is like the constraint templates that they deployed.
Yeah, it's like people are trying to use automation to like update their constraints and their templates and all that. And, you know, if you install a template, there's a latency before the CRD gets created. And so if you try to immediately install the constraint, that's going to fail, right? And so, you know, their complaint is, well, this doesn't work with Argo CD or whatever. But honestly, we have no control over that. Like, the best we can do is say, like, well, it's a known thing that this resource depends on this other resource being ingested. So maybe if Argo CD or whatever thing had a primitive that let you describe that relationship, or if whatever system you used was tolerant of transient failures, right? Like it retried a few times over a few minutes until it like finally decided, hey, this isn't going to work, because, you know, K8s is eventually consistent. That could be a solution, but all of those are like Argo CD or whatever deployment service doing something, right? Not us doing anything. We can't control that. We need templates. Maybe we could use like Gator to like bake out constraint or CRDs per constraint template, right? And if people had pipelines that they were wiring these things through, right, we can maybe make things a little easier that way, right? If these systems at least recognize the CRD to custom resource relationship. But I think that's the most we could do, really. And it's not clear to me that that would be helpful for these use cases.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that the problem exists at deployment, which, yeah, I agree that I think it falls more to the Argo side, and I mean,
and I don't want to like, hotspot on Argo here. That's just one of the systems they mentioned in the bug.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. It's I think it's on the responsibility of the way the pipeline is architected, right? Like, put a sleep in your deployment logic to like that this problem has existed in computing for a long time, in distributed systems especially, and yeah, anyway.
Yeah, like if they specifically would like us to write out CRDs, that could be interesting. Like Gator could do that. There is some interesting version skew concerns there potentially, but might ameliorate things a little bit.
Can we just say it's not a bug and it's outside of the scope of the project and close it?
Yeah, if we're fine with that stance.
I'm okay. Who's gonna follow up?
I can, if
Yeah,
no one else wants
go
to.
for it.
Fine with me.
Yeah, you might be able to cite, I think I commented with what I said on that issue thread, so you might be able to just reference that.
Sounds good. This one, I think, was another one that was related to not being able to iterate over the cache.
We want to have a solution to this. It's just expensive. Like I would personally put this above mutation, because the mutation exclusion, or the immutable mutation thing, because it unblocks a lot of stuff, right? Like right now, OPA is our only source of cache, which kind of limits where referential data can be used just generally, right? So designing a solution that is both iterable and overcomes that limitation, it's very under the hood work, but unblocks a lot. Unfortunately, it's very complex work. Like I had someone looking at this, but again, the staffing has changed and there will be a ramping up period. Apologies.
Why can't we do this with the existing workflow?
With OPA's cache, because there's no reliable way to iterate over OPA's cache. Like, to be clear, you could iterate over the cache if you're 100% sure you knew the shape of how things are stored in OPA's cache, but because it's like arbitrary, just an arbitrary JSON object, right? If you think about like constraint framework, the path that an object stored under is like coupled to the target, right? Like in Kubernetes, the path information includes whether it's cluster scoped or namespace scoped, the namespace, the group version kind, the name, and then you get to the object. Other places might have different depths at which the actual source of truth is stored. I think you probably also want to have, if possible, a little bit more flexible of query semantics. So yeah, one issue is there's just no agnostic way of writing the iterable stuff right now.
Yeah,
and there
but
could
we
be.
can do this with config exclusion, right? It just requires the cache to be wiped every single time.
Oh, no. So the problem is namespace labels, right? So right now, what we're doing with exclusion.
Oh no, I
is-
meant not the labels, but excluding namespaces in general. It is like it is
Oh,
possible.
users can do this, you're saying?
Right. Yeah. Like users can exclude namespaces, just not via labels. They just need to edit the. I mean, I guess admin action to edit the config file.
Yeah.
I see. So it is possible. It's just not on the like user level on the namespace.
Yeah, it's it
Do
would
we even
require
want that?
labels. Excluding based off of labels, I could see
We have
wanting.
namespace selector in the match criteria, right?
But it is not an admin action. That's what I'm concerned.
not
It's a
what?
user action. So say I created my namespace, right? And then I can
Mhm.
exclude it.
I would,
We
yeah,
don't
I
want
would.
you to easily exclude it, right? We want the policy author to like do it.
Yeah, that's my concern there. Like, do we even want that?
I see. I think certain people may, others may not. I think there's a delegation model where someone creates a cluster and then gives users a namespace, and they don't own the namespace object, but they own everything in the namespace,
I see.
right? And so their editing namespace labels is a relatively privileged action and could make sense. For delegation models where someone owns a cluster entirely, maybe modulo like, certain kinds. No, because then they would own namespace labels.
And just to be clear, like I think in the issue I did comment you could use namespace selector and excluded namespaces, right? Which would allow you to do this, like, not just one by one. So I feel like we have a solution already.
Oh, you can't use namespace selector for exclusions. Certainly not for sync.
Well,
Right,
we
'cause-
have excluded namespaces that allows glob today. Prefix.
Oh, sorry. When I hear namespace selector, I think label selector, but for namespaces.
Well,
That's how.
namespace selector is in label selector. So we already have this in the match field.
We do not have a label selector for the exclusion in the config.
Not for exclusion, but
So-
for match, I guess.
Yeah. So
Included.
if for enforcement, there's an alternative here. For syncing, I don't think there is.
Right. And it's
Oh, you're saying it'll still be synced. It's just not enforced.
Yeah.
I see. I think you guys are saying slightly different things. Yeah. So what Rita is saying, it will still be synced, but it won't be enforced. And then you were saying like it won't. It's like everything will be synced.
Yeah, I forget. I sort of remember this as being about syncing, but maybe I'm wrong here.
No, this one is actually about exclusion. Well, it says it was about excluding it from, sorry, a namespace selector audit too. Just for audit.
Mm.
And then I offered this, I said, hey, you guys can use a namespace selector. The original person said true. Ugly copy pasta.
Mm. Mm.
But I feel like that works, so.
Yeah, I kind of am not a huge fan of, complex centralized exclusions of like the policy surface. The syncing thing, I'm a bit more like, I see there's no way for people to do that right now, like at all.
Oh, the same person who opened that issue opened another one for label selector and namespace selector for sync only.
Oh,
That's
that
why
might be
you
weird.
remember the sync stuff. It's the same guy, so.
Gotcha.
I was like, I do remember this, but where was this? Yeah.
Yeah,
What
and
was the other one? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
and for me, I think it's just a question of uniformity, right? Like, I wouldn't want to have namespace selector in config for everything but sync. Like, I'm not sure that's even possible based on how the config is currently shaped. It's not that much work to have a namespace selector for enforcement. So whatever, other than the fact that sync is kind of a blocking technical concern.
I think it's awkward because we all commented and said this is a good idea.
Yeah, I'm still not opposed to it. I'm like, once we have iterable cache stuff, this is like a 5-minute thing to add. Not 5 minutes, half a day. But the problem is it's blocked on iterable cache.
And which issue is tracking that one?
It's probably has iterable cache name.
Okay. Maybe we should link that one to this one so that we can close both when it's done.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably mentioned more if you said there's a second issue that deals directly with sync.
Yeah,
It might be
It's-
mentioned in that one.
it's linked in that one. What do you call it? Iterative cache?
I called it iterable cache.
Iterable?
Okay, I don't see iterable cache showing up though.
You did mention it in the sync, the request to add namespace selector for sync. You did mention it.
Yeah, I might have been waiting to, because I knew multi-engine was coming, and that changes the surface for what it might mean to have an iterable cache.
Okay, then do you want to just comment in this one and say this is pending the iterative cache, since the other one that is actually about sync got closed?
Oh no, it got closed. Yeah, I could do that. Is
It's
there,
confusing.
yeah, I have 2 issues now. Is there like a link to this board or something so I can like refine
No,
these
this is
things that
my
we've
like
talked about?
private board that I use to track stuff.
Okay. Can
But
we
if you
chat
just go to the gatekeeper issues and just sort by thumbs, it's towards the top there.
I think
Also,
Lisa pasted.
pasted the link in the chat as well. But which one do we want to keep? Because this one is not about sync. The other one is.
I think they're the same issue. I would just like say this is all one thing, because process excluder is a global object, right? It has a common syntax, and then it's not either or, and this is just all blocked on iterable cache.
But I feel like unless you need the resource to be synced, we do have solutions today, right? So it's not like this.
Yeah, sure. And that's a good argument for if we were only going to consider this feature in isolation, right? But like the common syntax works both ways, right? If we have a namespace selector for sync exclusion, we're going to have a namespace selector for enforcement exclusion. So these things just have shared fate. I think that there is a alternative here, like lowers the priority, right, relative to enforcement, because there's an alternative. There's less pain here, but that's about it.
Sure.
Are we okay on this one? Sorry, where did we land on this? I had to kick my cat out of the room because he was being distracting.
I think we're good.
Okay. All right, last one that I marked here.
Keeper config excluded namespaces, regex.
Another exclusion. I think this one is pretty straightforward, I guess. Oh, this is the.
Why is
There's
that
a
blocked
theme.
on? What was the? I might have been wrong about that. Did I have an explanation for why it's blocked on excluded iteratable cache stuff in the history of
Maybe
this?
you were thinking about the other issue again.
No,
very
that was the only comment on it beyond, yeah, the initial issue.
Yeah, this is the config wildcard.
But this is related for sure.
It's related. What makes this one different to me is namespace names are immutable, right? So the only trigger of a cache wipe would be a change to the config resource, which is already true, right? The sort of like anti-behavior that I wanted to avoid is wiping the cache every time there's any update to any namespace ever, right? Which would basically there's a very real risk that it would just never be a cache at that point.
For this one, I don't think it would require changing the config resource because it's the regex. It's just in the code side that this gets evaluated.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't upgrade the field to a regex because then you would deal with like substring match issues. It should be like a net new field, but.
I mean, I don't know if like we need to implement this. We can ask if anybody is interested in contributing this.
But wouldn't you have the same issue with the wiping out the cache? Wouldn't you have the same issue?
If you change it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it makes the problem worse than it currently is.
But I would imagine this should also wait for the cache improvement, right?
I mean, it might make things better if a user is doing this to cover multiple things, so they don't have to like edit every single time. I don't know.
But we do allow like wildcards right now, just not regex.
Right.
Is that right? For
Yep.
the exclusion?
Yep. I think we have a prefix, postfix, all the combinations.
Just no groups. Baby GK.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So what happens to cache if a synced namespace is deleted? Does it still wipe out and then recache everything?
No, because if a namespace is deleted, there's delete events that are inferred for all objects that are being synced. So we could just rely on normal K8s semantics to catch that.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, only thing it gets wiped is when you modify the config object.
Is the versioning such a big deal? Like the white wildcard for the, I feel like they're similar, right? A regex is like kind of could be a wildcard too, though.
Yeah. I mean, regex definitely includes everything that
Yeah.
globs can do and more. So I think this is just the and more bit.
I guess like I'm just being a devil's advocate. Like, why are we okay with this, but then we said no to the wildcard for like GVK, like allowing different.
Oh, because they're very operationally different, right? If this is just a wild card around which namespaces are included from sync, right? So one, there's no risk of like spontaneous excess memory usage. If anything, you're limiting your RAM usage. Also, there's no extra interactions with the cluster implied by this, right? This is just a filter that we're running against events that we're already receiving. Whereas if we have a wildcard against like GVKs that we're syncing, now we need to figure out how to watch the discovery API.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense. Because this is like controlled to one type, whereas the other one, you don't even know the type that's in the cluster. Yeah.
I definitely get, we use wildcards ourselves in a lot of places. It's just, there are other ways we're looking to mitigate that use case and given the expense of it, maybe better places to spend our time.
I wonder how Kyverno solves that.
How Kyverno what?
Solves this problem.
I don't think they do. I mean, it's been a while since I looked at what they're doing, but they're, I think, reaching out directly to the API server for policies. At least that used to be the case.
Mhm.
So you specify the full resource URI.
Okay. We can move on, I guess.
That's the last one that I had. So I can pass to if there was any other agenda items.
Yeah,
I did add that design doc that I introduced, was it last week or the week before? I mean, we only have 6 minutes, so probably not worth trying to discuss it, but are people aware of it? Have they had a chance to read it yet?
I did read it.
You did or did
it.
not?
I did.
Okay.
Well, I think it makes sense, but my initial reaction was, oh my God, we have to like support two different. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to noodle on that a bit just to think about what's the same way to have to support both for a while, right?
Yeah, I think the good things are, one, if we agree in principle, we don't need to agree on the details. And it unblocks like a lot of stuff that we're trying to do because we can be a little looser with what's in match conditions, right? Like matching against request verb. in our current target handler, I mean. And two, yeah, because it's like a huge pain. It's the kind of thing I only really want to do once. Preferably 0, but I don't think we're at that point personally. So yeah, it makes sense if people have any sort of like thoughts on the shape of it. The extra features that they may see that aren't supported by the current proposed shape in particular, those should be sorted out before we actually try to do anything. But if we agree this is where we want to go, it de-risks this other stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say we have a few minutes left and I don't think we can finish the target handler design. Should we see if Jay needs anything for what he's working on? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Jay,
Yeah,
floor's all yours.
cool. Yeah, so I just added high level implementation details on the path to implement multi-A and multi-EP design doc, and I just wanted your eyes to just confirm that high level design I'm thinking towards is in the right direction, and those are the changes that will lead to the implementation. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, so the extra validation, I wonder, like before the cell cap for VAP, there was another thing where they were using cell to perform validations built into the CRD, right? So I don't know what the state of that is, but if it's possible to do the validation there, that would be nice. Because then it would be a little bit more portable. We wouldn't need to have the webhook there. That's a small thing.
You mean the standalone controller, Max?
Standalone controller?
Yeah, like they were working on a standalone VAP controller.
Oh no, this is separate from VAP. They just share some commonalities in that cell, right? It's kind of like the test implementation of cell in the K8s API server was you could extend a CRD resource with cell code that allowed you to validate fields, right? Like, so you could do like string validation or whatever if you could write a cell statement. And it seems like it would work for something like this, right? Like if field equals this, make sure this, both must be defined, that kind of stuff. I don't know how generally available the feature is if it is GA, but that's just a thought, right? That if we can avoid server-based validation where possible, then we can also get the validation in like other places more easily.
Is it what you're talking about? I put it in the chat, the cell admission webhook. So not this one?
I actually can't link that right now, but cell admission webhook sounds
I can
promising.
drop it in the let me see. I dropped it in the meeting notes.
Okay. Here's a blog that references the thing I was thinking about. It might be the same thing. Let me click your thing now.
So then we would transfer all validation or just this kind of validation, because we already validate incoming constraint template for enforcement action and like
Yeah, I wouldn't try to. I wouldn't be against if it was possible migrating. I don't think it's possible though. Like we call out to the engine, right, to run validations. That's not going to be representable in cell, for instance. So this is just more where we can avoid relying on a webhook. It would be nice if we did.
because there's definitely underlying validation as well, right? It's not just that enforcement action is defined scope, then we must have this field. We also want to validate the incompatible matching of enforcement point and enforcement action as well.
Yeah, and some of that won't be in cell. So that's fair. I guess for the stuff that can, it's worth looking at the state of this feature and seeing if we can like start to use it. It was mostly my thought. It's basically just an extension to Open API schema.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a good point. That definitely that's not expressible. Probably would be more in the the enforcement stuff that would live in policy go. That's right. Review to pass the source enforcement point. Review the function call. Yeah, that makes sense. Constraint client to include scoped enforcement action fields. Is that constraint? Oh, that's that thing. Yes. Update matches to compute appropriate enforcement action for past enforcement. Right. Matches, meaning, so we're in the constraint client. Yes. Yeah, so there's a couple of missing things. I think we talked about updating when you instantiate the client, the constraint framework client, give the option to pass in the enforcement points as well there. Right, and then when review is called, you can pass the enforcement point explicitly, or just assume that it's operating as all enforcement points that were passed in. Does that make sense?
Can you elaborate more?
So Gatekeeper creates a constraint framework client, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how the user is set up, Gatekeeper, maybe it says, I am an admission webhook and I'm also audit, right? Because they're just running in a single pod.
Yep.
When audit calls review, it says, I am calling as audit, right? When webhook calls review, it says, I'm calling as webhook. If for some reason we forget to pass what we're doing, right? Or it's not useful, right? Like let's say Gator really is only Gator. They do not need to pass their enforcement point as part of review. They've already passed it as part of the constructor for the constraint framework client.
Okay.
But yeah, this makes sense to me in the quick glance. So thank you.
Cool. Then I'll start the implementation and then include the whatever we discussed, and then we can discuss further feedback on the PR itself.
Cool.
Cool.
Well, we're at time. I've got to run. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Good to see y'all.